Now that we've learned about the macronutrients and the micronutrients, we're going to shift our focus to energy balance and how to achieve and maintain a healthy body weight. We hear all the time about how too much body weight is negative for our health, but actually being underweight also presents risks to our health as well. So you can see from this graph, and we'll talk more about this throughout our focus this week, but there's a risk, the risk of death increases with too low a body weight, and then it increases again with too high a body weight. So we really have this J-shaped curve, and we'll talk about some of the risk of being both overweight and underweight throughout this week's segments. There are a lot of misconceptions about body weight. First, the fact that we focus on weight only. There are a lot of other indicators of health. So just because someone is overweight or obese doesn't necessarily mean they're unhealthy, and just because someone is of normal weight, or we could say skinny, doesn't mean that they're healthy either. So there are many other indicators of health, and these could be things like blood pressure, looking at someone's blood values. So do they have, like LDL and HDL cholesterol? What are their triglycerides? So there are a lot of other indicators of health rather than just body weight alone. And we always tend to focus on controlling body weight, but it's important to be cognizant or be mindful of body composition as well. So really what we want to focus on is not having too much body fat. So having plenty of lean muscle mass or just lean tissues instead of having a majority of our weight being fat. So remember, don't focus only on your weight, focus on what your body composition makeup is as well. The third misconception about weight is that it's always about what am I doing right now in the short term. So you've probably been on a diet, or you know someone that has been on multiple diets, and what we've found from the research is really that dieting is not effective. So while people are on a diet, they tend to lose weight, they tend to do well, but as soon as they go back to their normal behaviors, they tend to regain that weight. So really very few people are able to maintain weight loss. And within a couple of years following the weight loss attempt, they either regain all or most or all of the weight that was lost. So it's really important to focus on sustainable lifestyle changes rather than these quick fixes that are just for the short term and not really sustainable over the long term. So obesity has increased in the United States really over the last 30 years, and today more than 2/3 of adults in the U.S. are overweight or obese, and these rates are expected to continue to rise. They have leveled off in the recent years, but the obesity rates are still increasing. About 17% of children and adolescents are obese, and then about 2% of adults are underweight. So remember, underweight is still of health concern. We're still concerned about these individuals, but they do make up a small segment of our population. So now I'll show you how obesity has changed, or how obesity has increased in the United States really since 1990. So we're going to go through some pictures that you can see the progression of increase in obesity prevalence. So this is from 1985. You can see a lot of states didn't have any data, but the highest percentage here is 10 to 14%. We go to 86, 87, 88, 89. So you see we're having fewer states that we don't have any data on, so we're getting more information. 1990, 91, we've added a new category with this 15 to 9%. 92, now we can see that no one, from 93, no one is in that less than 10% category. By 1994, we had information from every single state, and we still don't have anyone in that less than 10% category. 95, 96, 97, we add a new category of greater than 20%. And more states keep adding to that greater than 20%. 2000, 2001, we add a new category with a greater than 25%, and we only had one state there. And then at this point, we only have one state that's in the 10 to 14%. By 2002, we no longer have anyone in that 10 to 14%. So you can see the concern here. 2003, 2004, 2005 is when we add our new category of greater than 30%. 2006, 2007, you can see Colorado is our only state that is in that 15 to 19%. 2008, 2009, 2010. And by this point, no states have any obesity rates of less than 20%. So again, about 33% or 2/3, excuse me, of adults in the United States are overweight or obese, and this is really just focusing on obesity, which is defined as greater than a BMI of greater than 30. And we'll talk more about what BMI means in a couple of slides. But what I really want you to see from this is how the prevalence of obesity has increased since 1990. So this is of great concern to the U.S. because of the health risks associated with overweight and obesity, and this is also related to increased healthcare costs. So now let's first talk about being underweight. What are the risks from this? So in times of famine, individuals who are underweight are the first ones to die. These individuals that are underweight that are in a hospital for a long time may have decreased nutrient status or nutrition. Basically, if you're in the hospital for a long time, you may not be able to eat due to tests or surgery. And if they don't have good nutrition to start with, they're going to maybe move into this wasting disease. Individuals with cancer that are also underweight, having some excess body weight can be somewhat protective because these individuals usually will die from starvation. And then being underweight also increases the risk for heart disease and has other negative health outcomes. So with that, excessively underweight individuals are urged to gain body fat to provide some extra energy in times of when it's really needed. So having some excess body weight or having a little bit of body fat really is protective. So we do want to have some body fat. Just like we talked about having fat in our diet, it's essential to have fat on our bodies as well. On the other side of the spectrum, what are the risks from having too much body fat? There are many obesity-related illnesses and chronic diseases related to having excess body fat. So these could include things like heart disease, diabetes, arthritis. Some cancers are associated with excess body fat, hypertension or high blood pressure, gallbladder stones, and stroke. Additionally, individuals that are overweight or obese and that have excess body fat are essentially in a chronic state of inflammation. So when they have excess body fat, this causes adipokines to exert inflammatory effects, and this makes your cells in the body resistant to insulin. So this can lead to the progression of diabetes and eventually cardiovascular disease due to this chronic state of inflammation. There are other risks associated with too much body fat, including things like hernias, having a high accident rate, sleep apnea is very common, and reproductive problems can persist in these individuals as well. What's really cool, though, is that many of these conditions can be improved with just a 5 to 10% weight loss. So for an individual that is very overweight or obese, 5% really isn't that much of a weight loss, and it can have some very positive beneficial health effects. This slide shows some other medical problems associated with obesity. So a lot of these are related to many of the things we talked about. So, abnormal lipid values will probably lead to heart disease. All of this can be related to hypertension, renal disease. We talked about sleep apnea. So there are a lot of risks associated with obesity, and not only health risks, but again, this can increase our healthcare costs. All right, let's switch our focus to central obesity. So central obesity is having a concentration of excess fat around the abdomen. So there are two different types of fat in our body. So we have visceral fat, which is what's found deep in our abdominal areas. And this is what's related to central obesity. So this is the one we're really concerned about for health. Then we also have subcutaneous fat, which is found directly underneath our skin. Having excess visceral fat or excess central obesity increases the risk of death from all causes. And it's also one of the components of metabolic syndrome. So metabolic syndrome is related to these conditions, and all of these, so central obesity, having high blood pressure, high glucose, and altered blood lipids can all increase the risk for heart disease. So you may have seen or heard this analogy before about being an apple or a pear shape. So this is what we use to talk about, or this can help you remember central obesity. So the apple is going to be related to, or is going to represent our central obesity. So you can see it's very concentrated here right in the abdomen. So the apple is going to be associated with increased health risk. On the other hand, we have our apple where there is some abdominal or central obesity, but a lot of it's in the hips. This is still not great, but it is more protective than the apple shape. All right, so evaluating risk from body fatness. We have several methods we can use to evaluate our risk. So we use body mass index, waist circumference, and disease risk profile. And all of these go to looking at the total health risk from obesity for a certain individual. So body mass index is what we use as an indicator of obesity, and it looks at someone's weight compared to their height. So you can see the different categories here. I would know these. So underweight individuals have a BMI of less than 18.5. Normal weight is 18.5 to 24.9. Overweight is 25 to 29.9. And then anyone who's obese has a BMI of greater than 30. So you can just think of obese in general as being greater than 30. And extreme obesity is when someone has a BMI of greater than 40. We can also look at waist circumference, which is going to reflect someone's degree of central adiposity or central obesity. So again, thinking about someone that's an apple shape. And someone, this is different for men and women. So if a man has central obesity or a waist circumference of greater than 40 inches, this would put him at risk for heart disease. And for women, it's 35 inches. And again, both the waist circumference and body mass index taken into account with disease risk profile all go into evaluating an individual's risk from body fatness and obesity and how this can have a major impact on health.